very exciting to have you both together. And briefly as well, with your own words, go ahead.
And I wrote a book called Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men, which is basically about the way that the vast majority of information we have collected globally and continue to collect, everything from medical data to urban planning data.
I guess it's on me now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Started so long ago when I was a teenager and really trying to figure out what was going on from a sporting standpoint of trying to understand why things that were being applied to male teammates was working and why results in the lab weren't really on par with the men, and I wasn't getting answers. So it is data driven, really. Like the answers weren't there, and it was told so many times that women are an anomaly. We don't know enough about women or enough about men, so why do we want to study women? Women have a menstrual cycle, it's too difficult. We just group them together to create a bigger N, and try to do some bootstrapping to figure it out. And so it was just really frustrating and annoying. And when you're like young in your teens or 20s and you feel invincible, you're like, this is not right. And that fire is continued for couple of decades as I reveal how old I really am. And so it's just really frustrating going as an elite professional athlete and still getting treated the same way as the men I was not competing against because of the different categories, but still being told to eat like them, to train like them, to recover like them, and it just wasn't working. So that's my drive, is to really get in and get the research going specific for female physiology. And now that I have that voice out there and have more and more women who are in their late 40s, early 50s, approaching menopause and stuff, and they're like, what about us? What about us? Like all the aging data is on sedentary, obese women or men. What about us? So we have another book in the works as well, and couple of online courses. Okay. Yep. So so it's trying to progress. I want to get into the onset of puberty next. So first take care of like the general consensus, then go back down and work with
interesting.
Developing kids, because like there's so many girls that drop out of sport. They feel uncomfortable. They're so swayed by social media and what they're supposed to look like, and no one talks to them about what happens right before their periods come or at the onset of puberty and how their body changes and it's normal. And that's a conversation that's not had. And parents don't really have it with their kids either. And then when you have girls in sport and they can't even broach it with their coach, because the coach also might get in trouble from the parents if the parents don't want to have that conversation. So it's kind of a bit of a lack of education, lack of data, and a bit of a quagmire there too. Yeah.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah. And so I've noticed an uptick in like women's specificity, especially in sport, in the past 3 or 4 years, which is exciting. Have you noticed, like, people, like you're saying, okay, now we're getting more data based on women. Is there any one area that people are really gelling into, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think sport is being a big driver, which is fantastic. And there is more in health in certain areas as well, in sort of medical research. But it's just very patchy,
Yeah.
So there are some amazing things being done, but then you still have all these studies which just don't include women at all for no reason. And no one seems to point it out, Okay, just the other day I was reading this article about microdosing, and this study that was going to be done on microdosing, and it was just mentioned that it's just going to be men who are recruited, and it was in the New Scientist, and actually maybe it wasn't in the New Scientist, I shouldn't say that just in case it wasn't, but it was actually, do you know what, I think it was in New Zealand, this microdosing study.
Probably.
And Yeah, and this researcher was like, this is going to be the first study. We're going to find out whether or not microdosing actually has any impact, you know, because there's all this anecdotal evidence. It's going to be the first proper study. And so we'll recruit these men, and then we'll know. And if it doesn't have an impact, then we'll know. And it was just like, no, you won't. I mean, you won't know.
No, you won't.
It's so frustrating that that's still happening. But having said that, you know, while it's been really frustrating in this pandemic to see all the same old tropes come out again of how little we know about the female body, and how when crisis hits we sort of decide that sex and gender are just add-ons that we can think about maybe if we have time. On the other hand, it feels like this is being spoken about as an issue like it never has been before. Like if you look back at previous disease outbreaks, and how hidden gender was, versus now when it is actually something that is getting high profile write-ups in like the New York Times.
I think it's because of the fact that the men are the ones that are having a worse time with COVID, right? And so now they're like, oh, we need to really investigate why this is happening. And I always think like, what if the women had the worst outcome? Would they be pushing it so much?
Yeah.
Not quite so sure.
No, I'm not either. But on the other hand, whatever it takes. And if if this finally gets people to wake up to the fact that male and female bodies are not exactly the same, and you can't base all your research on one sex and expect it to apply to the other sex, then, you know, that is a sort of net positive.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you know, there's still all that really concerning advance into AI, particularly in medicine, but in all sorts of areas, where it's like any advancement that has been made into understanding the need for sex disaggregated data has regressed about 3 decades when it comes to AI. When actually, when you're coding with machine learning, you need to have advanced by about 3 decades your understanding of sex disaggregated data if you aren't going to make us regress. So I sort of feel like that's perhaps the most concerning area, is the development of machine learning without using sex disaggregated data and without trying to correct for the incredibly male biased data that we have, including in medical, but obviously in all sorts of areas as well, other areas as well.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I